talk about first day in pads.
It was good. The last 2 days were in uppers. Today was acclimatization day number 5. The first day we were allowed to be in full pads. So we cut down a little bit of the individual stuff today. Focused on some team stuff. No live tackling, but I thought the kids had an hour and a half of really, really good work out there, and took another positive step forward.
Is truism, does tempo change when everybody puts on the full arm equipment and gets going?
Conventional wisdom would dictate that it does, but one of the many things I've learned in my brief time here is, and I'm sure you saw in Hard Knocks last night, the tempo doesn't change at Mississippi State. So whether we're in helmets, whether we're in uppers, whether we're in full pads, they go. So you much rather say woe than sick 'em. So no, it doesn't change because these kids go hard 100% of the time.
We've seen Willie out the last couple of days.
Sir?
We've seen Willie out the
Yeah,
last
lower
couple
body,
days.
day to day.
Nothing big.
There'll be nothing extended.
How is Zuber kind of picking up the offense so far?
Really well. I think when you go back and look at his stuff at Kansas State, he played a variety of positions, played the slot, played both outside positions. So more than anything, it's formations, it's language. Some of the things that we do in the pass game that are, route adjustment oriented. Coach Johnson's doing a real good job with those guys, and Isaiah's picking up quickly.
Because of that versatility, do you anticipate being able to kind of move them around the formation?
Yeah, we want to cross-train our receivers like we do our offensive line. We necessarily don't want to get one guy locked into a position. And with our pass game, it's taught conceptually rather than by position. So it's not about, what does the X, the Z, or the H have on this route. It's am I field number 1, field number 2, or field number 3, boundary number 1 or boundary number 2. So, based on what the formation is, you kind of plug them into those spots. So I think, that flexibility will allow us to put people where they need to be.
Some of the stuff we got to see, Javante Payton's look
Yeah.
good out there. Has he continued to look good when we leave the practice field?
Yeah.
Has he been impressing you guys?
Yeah, they've we I think last year haven't been able to pass the ball very successfully. Essentially everywhere I've been, was pretty optimistic of the strides we were going to take in year one in the transition offenses. And I said it before, and it probably bears repeating. I thought we could go from A to Z, and we went from A to M. Went from a season where we had a 250-yard receiver as a leader to 2 guys having 400. And I think with the skill that we have returning, and those guys having another year and understanding in the system, in addition to the guys we brought in, that was one of our goals offensively into fall camp, is improving the efficiency, the explosiveness of the pass game, and I think the guys will allow us to do that.
Do you know where Peyton could end up position-wise?
He's working Z right now primarily, but he's a guy that can also play the slot. But some of the things, like I said, formationally, he can also end up as boundary 1 too. So primarily is a Z, but the Z lines up in a couple different spots based on what the call is.
Speaking of last year, Nick Fitzgerald had 211 carries last year.
Oof.
That's a lot for a Joe Moorhead offense. Ideally, how much would you like to run the quarterback?
Historically, it has been about 10 to 15 a game max, and I think that's ideal. And I think the reason you saw so many carries was because of some of our struggles in certain games passing the ball, and when that occurs, teams know that you have to run it, and then you're going to get a stack box at the line of scrimmage. And when you're outnumbered by 1 or more, then you got to utilize the quarterback as a number in the run game, because you can't just continue to hand it off to unblocked people at the point of attack. The guy will get tackled at the line of scrimmage, and the emphasis on taking carries off the running back, getting carries to the running back and taking them off the quarterback has as much to do with our pass game as it does our run game. Because when we get people out of the crowded line of scrimmage and playing a little more too high shell, more of those carries can go to the quarterback instead of the running back because of the read element of it.
You mentioned cross-training the receivers. Does that apply in certain instances all the way to the tight ends and running backs as well?
More probably to the tight ends than the running backs. Yeah, we're not a big empty team. We'll do some of it. Probably I'd say we minor rather than major, but certainly some of the tight ends that we have in their athletic ability and their size are guys that we can move around a little bit.
When you look at the quarterbacks, is there separation between Thompson and Stevens, and then to Maiden and Schrader, or are they all just sort of equal at this point?
I don't know if it's necessarily separation as it is focus on guys who most realistically have a chance to win the job, and their their assignment, for lack of a better term, in this quarterback competition, and also just throughout fall camp, is to improve the efficiency and explosiveness of the pass game while minimizing turnovers. So they're all charted and graded daily on those aspects of the game. But I don't want to say it's a two-horse race because anything could happen. But KT and Tommy are getting the reps with the ones and twos, and Garrett and Jalen are getting the threes.
You mentioned the media day. You'd probably ideally like to know somebody. I think you said the Wednesday, like 10 days out from the first game, you'll have a scrimmage or something. Is that still kind of in your mind, sort of the timeline, even though it's not in stone?
I mean, that is the rough estimate, and I think it's probably I won't say the most ideal, but it's kind of a time frame where when a true competition is occurring that we've earmarked as a spot. I mean, if it separates earlier, it separates earlier. I mean, the sooner you can name it, the better, because for consistency and cohesion. But it could go longer. I don't know, but I think ideally as soon as you can. Conventionally, it's been that Wednesday, and if it's still tight, it could go longer.
How would you kind of assess where your depth is right now at the running back position?
Yeah, we Collins, the clear-cut one. He's doing a real good job. Nick's played a lot of good football here at Mississippi State, and is the kind of guy can do a lot of things. Really excels in pass protection, and I think he's a guy that is gonna have to share some of the load. And right now Lee is taking the threes, and you can see why he averaged almost 20 yards a touch. I think the first few days the speed and physicality of SEC football was a bit of a surprise to him, but you didn't see it today. He broke off along with today, and is picking up pass protection. That'll be the biggest thing. I mean, the guy can take a handoff and make a read and run the ball, but to be able to diagnose blitzes and pressures and protect physically in this league will be his biggest adjustment.
After just a couple of practice and then a year being away from him, is Tommy still the same quarterback you remember, or have you seen any change in him since y'all been a part of here?
Well, I mean, it's been almost 2 full years, so I mean, what I remember last is the Maryland game where I think he threw for 1, ran for 2. I think he had 100 rushing maybe and 100 passing, so that was a good memory. But I think like anything in any quarterback in any position, another year in a similar type of system, because Coach Ronnie and Penn State kind of implemented the same deal. You see just a mature guy, and I think with anything, him being a grad transfer, there's that final year urgency about him. So more than anything, I think an increased understanding of the system. But I see a more mature and more urgent player is what I'm seeing from Tommy.
You played Tommy at wide receiver some when he was up there. Is there a plan if he doesn't win or if KT doesn't win, is there a plan to maybe find another position for them?
We have not discussed that. We're focusing on what they're going to do to win the job, and assuming one of the two is going to win it. And then when that happens, our job is to identify who our playmakers are and put them in a position to be successful. So if the guy who doesn't win it is a guy that can play a running back position or a Cordell Stewart, Steelers reference, slash kind of role, and do some things like we did with Tommy at Penn State and did a little tiny bit with KT last year, then we'll do that.
You'd have to call it Bulldog on the depth chart.
My bad. Go for it.
You'd have to call it Bulldog on the depth chart. Instead
Bulldog?
Of lining
Yeah, I think it's something cooler than that.
Any update on Walker or Waitman?
Waitman, no update. Walker, I thought it was going to be sooner this week. There's still a couple administrative things on his end that he's working to take care of. So I probably got out in front of my skis saying early this week, last week. So that's just a work in progress. And when it gets finalized, it gets finalized. So.
You got 3 starters back on the offensive line, but they're all 3 in different spots.
Yep.
Just how is that unit kind of gelling together?
Real nice, and I think it's anchored by Daryl, who had a real nice season at guard and transitioning into center, and that's kind of the linchpin of the group. But I think it all goes back to Marcus's in our thought process of cross training guys during the season and getting reps in at different positions. So maybe when someone goes down, it's not the guy behind him on the depth chart. It's the next best guy to go in. And I think we cleaned up the protection early on last year. After some of those struggles, I think we did a nice job, and we were second in the SEC in rushing. So our kind of goal as an offensive line unit is to improve on those things. The great teams I've been on in the 4 championship teams, the mentality of those teams have been dictated by the offensive and defensive line, and I think that is something that our kids and Marcus take a great amount of pride in.
Last week you were talking about weight room and improvements there.
Yeah.
Obviously you've broken kind of a new staff in the weight room this year. Just what's your judge of how they've done so far, and what have you seen from them?
Yeah, I think bigger, faster, stronger, more explosive. I think we're seeing that across the board. When you look at some of the body weights, the majority of them, when we kind of go over the list, review it every Sunday, and then kind of have a quick thumbnail peek at it, every morning after practice. There's guys that are on the got to lose list, and there's guys that are on the got to gain list, and that list isn't very big. And the condition level, I think has been good. Obviously, it's challenging because it's what it is. Every team in the SEC and every team in the country is practicing these conditions, but I think they've handled it very well. And we've really made a conscious effort to make sure, we take 2 5-minute water breaks throughout the course of practice. We separate the team periods with install and review periods where there are more walkthroughs to make it as close to a simulation of the game as possible. We get our individual stuff in, we do the special teams, and then we water them down. Then we have a team period of 7-on-7, then an install and review, and then another water. So we kind of do making sure, because we want them concentrating on their energy, their effort, and their execution. And when you're kind of putting that kind of schedule together, I think the kids like it, and I think them allows to not worry about just getting through the rep, but maximizing it.
Have you always done that?
Yeah. Well, when I've been in charge, yes. Yeah.
KT made mention that the install is going a lot smoother this year because a lot of it's repetitive.
Yeah.
With you not really having to break in a new quarterback this year, how would you kind of assess where the quarterbacks are install-wise?
No, well, one's in year 2 and one's in, technically going into year 4. So that's always a positive. So I think from the quarterback position, and Coach Bryan and I were talking about it with the offensive staff a little bit earlier, that the 2 young guys, it's always nice to see them make a jump too. So Garrett and Jalen, and the reps that they're getting, I think they're, for guys who've only been in it for 1 year, to see their growth to year 2, and then the guys who've been in it kind of 2+, it's been pretty good.
Is this the biggest offensive line you've ever coached in terms of size?
I'd say more girth than size. At Penn State, our starting, just sheer, body mass. Our starting right tackle at Penn State for 2 years was Chaz Wright. He was 6'5", 6'6", like 340. Connor McGovern. Those guys, they were big, but I think, like Coach Franklin always said, the difference between other conferences in the SEC is the size, the speed, and the athleticism of the offensive lines. And I think our guys are just, I don't know if it's optical illusion. They look bigger. I don't know, maybe I'm wrong.
From what we saw when we came and worked with you that day, you like your offensive line to get to that second level. And
Yeah.
Is that a problem with the size they carry?
No, I think they've got good feet too. You don't want to sacrifice movement for size, but like we talked about there, four hands on the first level, 4 eyes on the second level. So you want to double team the guy into the lap of the other guy. So a lot of it is not truly a lot of single blocks, but we do a lot of gap schemes too. Not to get into a whole deal, but no, their ability to climb to the second level regardless of the scheme has been something that's been pretty good.
What do you see as Errol Thompson's best skill?
Errol?
Yeah.
Probably his cerebral approach. Yeah, he's like a quarterback on the defense. Yeah. Outside of everything else, the guy you like coach on the field.
How does someone with that kind of approach separate themselves in a SEC that always has a pretty high talent level at linebacker?
How does he?
How does someone with that approach kind of?
Well, I think
separate
it's not when you take his understanding of the game and his football IQ and you combine it with, a 255-pound guy that can plug interior gaps and also run sideline to sideline that has a high motor. I think those are guys who can play in this conference at a high level and also transition to the next one pretty well. Because when you go up there, it's not as much, I'm not going to say it's not as much of a spread game because teams are more 11 personnel in the NFL than they are anything else, but you do see a lot more 2-back where the traditional Mike linebacker has more of an interior role than maybe in a league like ours where more people are spread out and you're asking that guy to cover a lot of ground sideline to sideline.